My name is Eva Loron, and this is the story of how a single moment of humiliation became the foundation of a luxury empire worth $50 million. The memory still burns in my mind like a brand. I was 23, sitting in that cramped corner cafe on 5th Street, my fingers wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The notebook in front of me was falling apart, its pages yellowed and worn from countless hours of sketching. But inside those pages lived my dreams. Every stroke of my pencil was deliberate. Every curve, every clasp, every stitch I imagined was perfect. I was designing handbags that existed nowhere but in my imagination. Yet they felt more real to me than the shabby apartment I called home. The cafe was my sanctuary. For the price of one coffee, I could sit there for hours, lost in a world where poverty did not define me, where my second-hand clothes and empty wallet did not matter, where I could be the designer I knew I was meant to be. But then she walked in. Madison Rothschild. Even her name dripped with privilege. I recognized her instantly from college, though we had never been friends. How could we be? She was the girl who drove a different luxury car each semester, who wore designer clothes like they were disposable rags, who spoke about money the way others talked about the weather. She spotted me from across the cafe, her eyes narrowing as she took in my appearance. My stomach dropped. I tried to close my notebook, but it was too late. Eva. Her voice carried that particular tone of surprise mixed with disdain. Eva Morrison? Is that really you? I looked up, forcing a smile that felt like broken glass on my lips. Hello, Madison. She approached my table with the confidence of someone who had never been told no, never been rejected, never been made to feel small. Her designer heels clicked against the worn cafe floor like a countdown to my humiliation. What are you doing here? She glanced around the cafe with barely concealed disgust. This place is so quaint. By quaint she meant poor. Beneath her. Unworthy of her presence. Just working on some designs. I tried to close my notebook again, but her manicured fingers shot out, pinning it open. Her perfectly shaped eyebrows rose as she examined my sketches. For a moment, I felt a flutter of hope. Maybe she would see the potential. Maybe she would understand. Instead, she laughed. It was not a gentle giggle or an amused chuckle. It was a sharp, cutting sound that sliced through every dream I had ever dared to dream. It was the sound of privilege mocking ambition, of wealth dismissing possibility. Handbag designs. She picked up my notebook, holding it like it might contaminate her. Eva, you cannot even afford a decent purse yourself. She gestured dismissively at my worn canvas bag. A thrift store find that had seen better years. Look at what you are carrying. It is falling apart. The other customers in the cafe began to turn and stare. I could feel their eyes on me, could sense their judgment mixing with their curiosity. My cheeks burned with shame that felt like acid in my veins. I mean, honestly, Madison continued, her voice growing louder, more theatrical. Leave luxury to people who can actually buy it. People who understand what real quality looks like. She flipped through my pages, and each turn felt like a knife twisting in my chest. These were my dreams she was handling so carelessly. These were the visions that kept me awake at night, that made me believe I could be something more than just another girl from the wrong side of town. These are cute, she said, the word dripping with condescension. Like something you might find at a discount store. But luxury? Real luxury? That requires more than just sketches in a notebook. It requires connections, money, understanding of what wealthy people actually want. She set the notebook down and leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more devastating than her public mockery. Eva, you are sweet, but you are delusional. You work 2 jobs just to pay rent. You eat instant noodles for dinner. You shop at thrift stores. What could you possibly know about luxury? Each word was a calculated strike. She had done her research, knew exactly where to aim for maximum damage. I realized she had probably asked around about me, gathered ammunition for this very moment. I am not trying to be cruel, she continued, though cruelty dripped from every syllable. I am just being realistic. Some people are meant to create luxury. Others are meant to serve it. There is no shame in knowing which one you are. The cafe had gone completely quiet. Even the espresso machine seemed to have stopped its hissing. Everyone was watching this slow-motion car crash, this public execution of a dream. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. But something deeper than embarrassment was stirring in my chest. Something that felt like molten steel. Madison, I said quietly, my voice steadier than I expected. Thank you. She blinked, confused. What? Thank you for making it so clear what I need to prove. Her perfectly contoured face twisted into a frown. Eva, I think you misunderstood. I understood perfectly. I closed my notebook and stood up, my legs shaking but my resolve growing stronger with each breath. You have made it crystal clear that you think I do not deserve to dream about luxury, because I cannot afford it right now. You think that where I come from determines where I can go. I gathered my things, my movements deliberate despite my trembling hands. But here is what you do not understand, Madison. Everything you just said, every cruel word, every dismissive laugh, you just gave me the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. What are you talking about? You just showed me exactly who I never want to become. I slung my worn bag over my shoulder, and for the first time since she walked in, I felt proud of it. It represented struggle, yes, but it also represented determination. And more importantly, you just gave me all the motivation I will ever need. I walked toward the door, but turned back one more time. Madison, I want you to remember this moment. Remember this cafe, remember my notebook, remember how certain you were that I would never amount to anything. Because someday, when you see my designs in every luxury store in the world, when celebrities are carrying my bags on red carpets, when my name is synonymous with everything you think I could never create, I want you to remember that it all started right here, right now, with your doubt. Her mouth fell open, but no words came out. I walked out of that cafe and into the cold afternoon air, my whole body shaking with a mixture of humiliation and determination. The tears came then, hot and angry, streaming down my cheeks as I walked home to my tiny apartment. But something had changed inside me. Madison's cruelty had ignited something that mere encouragement never could have. She had not just insulted me. She had drawn a line in the sand and dared me to cross it. That night, in my cramped studio apartment, surrounded by the smell of instant noodles and the sound of my neighbors arguing through thin walls, I made a decision that would change everything. I spread my sketches across my bed and really looked at them for the first time since Madison's attack. Instead of seeing them through her eyes, amateur, naive, impossible, I tried to see them through the eyes of someone who believed in possibility. The designs were good. No, they were better than good. They were innovative, elegant, timeless. They had something that many luxury bags lacked: soul. I picked up my pencil and began to refine them. Each line became more confident, each detail more intentional. I was not just sketching anymore. I was building a foundation for revenge served on a silver platter. The next morning, I walked into the public library and spent 8 hours researching everything I could about the fashion industry. I learned about supply chains, manufacturing processes, marketing strategies, brand positioning. I read about every major designer, studied their origin stories, analyzed their successes and failures. I discovered that many of the most successful luxury brands had been started by people who were initially dismissed by the establishment. Coco Chanel was an orphan who revolutionized women's fashion. Giorgio Armani was a medical student who became one of the most influential designers in history. Ralph Lauren was the son of immigrant parents who built an empire from a single tie collection. If they could do it, so could I. But I knew that passion and determination alone would not be enough. I needed skills, knowledge, practical experience. I needed to transform myself from a dreamer into a professional. I enrolled in every online fashion course I could afford. I watched tutorials on leatherworking until my eyes burned. I studied business management, brand development, marketing psychology. Every spare moment became an opportunity to learn something new. During my lunch breaks at my first job, answering phones at a small accounting firm, I would sketch new designs and refine old ones. During my evening shifts at the local diner, I would mentally catalog every handbag that walked through the door, analyzing what worked and what did not. My coworkers thought I was obsessed. My friends, the few I had, thought I had lost my mind. But I did not care. I had found my purpose, and it burned inside me like a star waiting to explode. 3 months after that devastating encounter with Madison, I decided to take the first real step toward my dream. I had saved enough money to buy quality leather and basic tools. I was going to make my first prototype. I found a small leather workshop on the outskirts of town where the owner, an elderly man named Giuseppe, offered evening classes. Giuseppe had emigrated from Italy 50 years earlier, bringing with him generations of leatherworking knowledge. "Why do you want to learn?" he asked me during my first class, his weathered hands guiding mine as we worked the leather. "Because someone told me I never could." He smiled, understanding immediately. "Ah, the best reason of all." Giuseppe became more than just a teacher. He became a mentor. He taught me that luxury was not about price tags or exclusivity. It was about craftsmanship, attention to detail, and respect for the materials. He showed me how to read leather like others read books, how to understand its grain, its potential, its limitations. "Good leather tells stories," he would say. "Your job is to help it tell the right one." Under his guidance, I created my first handbag. It was far from perfect. The stitching was uneven in places, the corners not quite as sharp as I wanted, but it was mine. It was real. It existed outside of my imagination for the first time. I carried that bag everywhere. Not because I was proud of it, though I was, but because it reminded me that transformation was possible, that dreams could become reality with enough determination and skill. But one bag does not make a brand. I needed more than craftsmanship. I needed a business plan, investors, connections in an industry that was notoriously difficult to break into. I began attending every fashion event, trade show, and networking gathering I could find. Most of the time, I felt completely out of place among the perfectly dressed industry professionals with their expensive clothes and easy confidence. But I persevered, learning to speak their language, understanding their concerns, identifying their needs. The rejections came fast and brutal. One investor told me my designs were too accessible for luxury. Another said I lacked the pedigree necessary for high-end fashion. A boutique owner dismissed me before I could even open my portfolio. Each rejection stung, but none of them carried the particular venom of Madison's words. In fact, they seemed almost gentle in comparison. She had inoculated me against dismissal, made me immune to the kind of casual cruelty that might have destroyed someone else. After 18 months of rejections, I was beginning to doubt myself. My savings were nearly exhausted. My 2 jobs were barely covering rent and the costs of materials for new prototypes. I was living on instant noodles and determination, and both were running low. Then I met Scarlett Chen. Scarlett was different from every other investor I had encountered. She was younger, hungrier, more interested in disruption than tradition. She had made her fortune in tech, but was looking to diversify into luxury goods. Our meeting was supposed to last 15 minutes. It stretched to 3 hours. "Show me everything," she said after I finished my prepared pitch. I spread my designs across her conference table. Months of work, dreams made tangible. She studied each piece with the intensity of a surgeon examining X-rays. "These are exceptional," she said finally. "But more than that, they are honest. They do not try to be something they are not." "What do you mean?" "Most luxury brands today are built on exclusivity and intimidation. They make people feel privileged to be allowed to purchase their products. But your designs, they make the products worthy of the people carrying them, not the other way around." She picked up my latest prototype, a structured tote with clean lines and subtle hardware. "This is not trying to scream, 'Look at me.' It is confident enough to speak softly and trust that people will listen." I held my breath, afraid to hope. "Eva, I want to invest in your company. But more than that, I want to partner with you. I think we can build something extraordinary together." The contract negotiations took weeks. Scarlett was thorough, demanding, protective of her investment. But she was also fair, giving me creative control and a pathway to eventual majority ownership if the company met certain milestones. The day I signed that contract, I called my mother and cried for 20 minutes. All those months of doubt, all those nights wondering if I was delusional, all those moments when Madison's voice echoed in my head, they were finally answered. Someone believed in me. Someone with real money and real connections thought my dreams were worth investing in. But signing the contract was just the beginning. Now I had to prove that Scarlett's faith was justified. We started small. One signature handbag, meticulously crafted, positioned perfectly in the market. I worked with Giuseppe to find the finest leather suppliers, collaborated with Scarlett to develop a marketing strategy that emphasized quality over quantity, story over status. We called the bag the foundation. Both because it was the foundation of my brand, and because it represented the foundation of what luxury could be when it was built on craftsmanship rather than just exclusivity. The launch was modest. A small trunk show at an independent boutique, some targeted social media campaigns, a few carefully placed products with fashion bloggers who aligned with our values. But sometimes, if the foundation is solid enough, even a small spark can start a wildfire. The first sign that something special was happening came from an unexpected source. A young actress named Luna Martinez was photographed carrying the foundation to a coffee meeting. She was not yet a major star, but she was rising, and fashion bloggers paid attention to her choices. The photo went viral within hours. What struck people was not just the bag itself, though it was undeniably beautiful. It was the way Luna carried it. With confidence rather than desperation. As an extension of her personal style rather than a desperate grab for status. Within a week, our small initial inventory was sold out. The boutique was fielding calls from customers willing to wait months for the next batch. Fashion editors who had previously ignored my emails were suddenly interested in featuring the foundation in their magazines. But success brings scrutiny, and scrutiny brings challenges. Some established luxury brands tried to dismiss us as a fad, a flash in the pan that would disappear as quickly as we had arrived. Industry publications questioned whether we had the staying power to compete with heritage brands that had been building their reputations for decades. The criticism might have been devastating if I had not been prepared for it by something far worse than professional skepticism. Every negative review, every dismissive comment, every prediction of our failure seemed trivial compared to Madison's cruel laughter in that cafe. Instead of being discouraged by the criticism, I used it as motivation to prove them wrong. I poured everything I had learned, from Giuseppe's lessons about craftsmanship to Scarlett's insights about business strategy, into making our second design even better than our first. The foundation had been about proving that I could create something worthy of the luxury market. Our second bag, the Ascension, was about proving that I could build a sustainable brand with staying power. If the foundation had been a spark, the Ascension was gasoline on the fire. This time, it was not just rising actresses and fashion bloggers who took notice. A-list celebrities began carrying our bags to premieres and red carpet events. Influential fashion editors featured our designs in major magazines. Department stores that had previously rejected us began courting us for exclusive partnerships. Within 6 months of launching the Ascension, we had a waiting list that stretched for over a year. Customers were willing to pay full price and wait months for the privilege of owning one of our bags. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came when I saw our first knockoff. I was walking through a market in downtown Los Angeles when I spotted it. A cheap imitation of the foundation, sold by a vendor who clearly had no idea what he was hawking. Instead of being angry, I was thrilled. Knockoffs meant we had made it. We were successful enough to copy, influential enough to inspire imitation. We had achieved the kind of cultural impact that legitimate luxury brands spend decades building. That night, I called Giuseppe to share the news. "Congratulations," he said, his voice warm with pride. "Now you know you have created something truly valuable." "How can you tell?" "Because people want to steal it. No one bothers to counterfeit something that does not matter." As our brand grew, so did the opportunities and challenges. We expanded our line, opened our own flagship store, hired talented designers and craftspeople who shared our vision. Each milestone felt like another step away from that girl in the cafe, another piece of proof that Madison's prediction had been devastatingly wrong. But success is a double-edged sword. The higher we climbed, the more visible we became. And visibility meant that people from my past began to take notice. I started seeing my old classmates at industry events, networking gatherings, fashion weeks. Some were genuinely happy for my success. Others were clearly resentful of it. But Madison was notably absent from these encounters. Until last month. Scarlett had invited me to an exclusive dinner party at her penthouse. A gathering of successful entrepreneurs, investors, and innovators from various industries. It was the kind of event I would have been intimidated by a few years earlier, but now I moved through such gatherings with confidence earned through achievement. I was discussing supply chain innovations with a tech entrepreneur when I heard a familiar laugh from across the room. My blood went cold. I turned and there she was. Madison Rothschild, looking exactly as polished and privileged as she had 5 years earlier. She was holding court near the windows, regaling a small group with some story that apparently required dramatic gestures and theatrical facial expressions. For a moment, I was 23 again, sitting in that cafe with my falling-apart notebook and my thrift store bag. I could feel the old shame trying to resurface, the old insecurities scratching at the edges of my confidence. But then I remembered where I was, who I was now, what I had built. I was Eva Laurent, founder and creative director of one of the fastest-growing luxury brands in the world. I was wearing a dress that cost more than my old monthly rent, surrounded by people who respected my opinions and valued my insights. I had earned my place at this table, earned my seat at this gathering of successful people. Madison had not noticed me yet, too absorbed in her own performance to scan the room. But as I watched her, something caught my eye. She was carrying a handbag. My handbag. Or rather, what was supposed to be my handbag. It was a copy of the Foundation, but not a cheap market knockoff like the one I had seen in Los Angeles. This was a higher quality fake, the kind sold by sophisticated counterfeiters to people willing to pay several $100s for the illusion of luxury they could not actually afford. I knew it was fake immediately. Not just because I had designed the original, but because I knew every detail of our manufacturing process, every element that made our bags authentic. The hardware was slightly wrong, the leather was inferior quality, the stitching pattern was close but not quite right. But Madison was carrying it with the confidence of someone who believed it was real, showing it off to her audience like a trophy. This bag, she was saying as I moved closer, is from Eva Laurent. You know, the designer everyone is talking about. I was one of the first to discover her work. I nearly choked on my champagne. It is absolutely exquisite, she continued, running her fingers along the fake leather. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. Of course, there is a waiting list that stretches for months, but I have connections in the industry. She was lying so smoothly, so convincingly, that I almost admired her audacity. She had transformed herself from the person who mocked my dreams into someone who claimed credit for discovering my talent. Madison, I said quietly, stepping into her circle. She turned, and for just a moment, her perfectly composed mask slipped. I saw surprise, recognition, and something that might have been fear flash across her features before she recovered. Eva, she said, her voice bright with false warmth. What a wonderful surprise. Everyone, this is Eva Laurent, the designer I was just telling you about. The group turned to look at me with new interest. I smiled politely, acknowledging their introductions, but my eyes never left Madison's face. What a beautiful bag, I said, nodding toward the fake foundation she was clutching. Oh, this old thing? She laughed, but the sound was strained. Yes, it is one of yours. I absolutely adore it. May I? I reached for the bag, and she had no choice but to hand it over without seeming rude. I examined it carefully, making sure everyone in the group could see my inspection. The leather felt wrong in my hands, too stiff, lacking the suppleness that came from our careful tanning process. The interior lining was a different color than what we used. The serial number was missing entirely. Interesting, I said, loud enough for the group to hear. What? Madison asked, her voice tight. Oh, nothing. Just this is not one of ours. The group went quiet. Madison's face went white, then red. What do you mean? She asked. I mean, this is a counterfeit. A fake. I handed the bag back to her, making no effort to lower my voice. A pretty good one, actually. The hardware is almost right, and the shape is quite close. But it is definitely not authentic. Someone in the group gasped. Madison looked like she wanted to disappear. That is impossible, she stammered. I bought this from. I mean, I got this through. Through what channels? I asked gently. Because if someone sold this to you as authentic, they committed fraud. Our bags come with certificates of authenticity, serial numbers, and detailed documentation. They are only sold through authorized retailers or our own flagship store. Madison was trapped and she knew it. She could not claim to have bought it through legitimate channels without being able to produce documentation she did not have. She could not admit to buying a fake without destroying the image she had been trying to project. There must be some mistake, she said weakly. No mistake, I replied. But I understand the confusion. The counterfeit market for luxury goods is surprisingly sophisticated these days. People pay hundreds of dollars for fake bags, thinking they are getting the real thing. I paused, letting that sink in for everyone listening. Madison, I said, my voice warm but carrying an edge that only she would recognize. This reminds me of something you said to me once. Do you remember? About leaving luxury to people who can actually afford it. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Funny how things work out, I continued. You said I would never afford luxury. But here we are. I am designing it, and you are carrying a fake version of my work. The silence was deafening. Everyone in the group was staring, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed amusement. Madison looked like she wanted the earth to swallow her whole. I think, I said softly, you might have gotten us confused about who belonged where. I raised my champagne glass in a small toast. To authentic luxury, I said. And to knowing the difference between the real thing and a convincing imitation. The group murmured agreement and raised their glasses, but Madison did not join the toast. She was clutching her fake bag like a life preserver, her carefully constructed image crumbling around her. If you will excuse me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I just remembered I have another engagement. She fled toward the exit, leaving behind the group and her unfinished drink. One of the other guests, a woman I had been chatting with earlier, leaned toward me. That was brutal, she said, but she was smiling. Do I sense some history there? You could say that, I replied. She once told me I would never amount to anything in fashion because I was too poor to understand luxury. Ouch. It turned out to be the best advice anyone ever gave me. Not because it was true, but because it made me determined to prove it wrong. And now she is carrying knockoffs of your designs. Now she is carrying knockoffs of my designs. I took another sip of champagne and looked around the room. At the successful people who treated me as an equal. At the luxury that surrounded me not as something I was trying to access, but as something I had earned the right to inhabit. 5 years ago, Madison had tried to convince me that I did not belong in the world of luxury. Tonight, she had proven that she was the one who did not belong. Not because of her wealth or lack thereof, but because she had forgotten the difference between earning something and simply taking it. The irony was perfect, almost poetic in its completeness. The girl who had mocked my dreams was now desperate enough for validation that she would carry a fake version of those same dreams, pretending it was real. But perhaps the most satisfying part was not her humiliation. Though I would be lying if I said I did not enjoy it. The most satisfying part was realizing that I no longer needed her validation or anyone else's. I had built something real, something valuable, something that would outlast the petty cruelties and casual dismissals of people who confused privilege with worth. Later that evening, as I sat in my apartment, a far cry from the cramped studio where this journey began, I pulled out one of my old notebooks. The pages were still yellowed and worn, but now they seemed like artifacts from another life. I found the sketch I had been working on that day in the cafe, the design Madison had dismissed so cruelly. It was rough, unpolished, the work of someone still learning her craft. But the bones of it were good. The vision was clear. I had refined that design over the years, and it had eventually become the foundation. The bag that launched my brand and changed my life. Madison had been wrong about almost everything that day. But she had been accidentally right about one thing. That moment had defined my future. Just not in the way she had intended. I picked up my phone and opened my notes app, where I kept ideas for future designs. I started typing. New collection concept. The last laugh. Pieces inspired by the moment when doubt transforms into determination, when mockery becomes motivation, when the people who tried to limit you become the reason you refuse to be limited. It felt right. It felt like closure and new beginning wrapped together in the kind of beautiful irony that only real life can provide. My phone buzzed with a text from Scarlett. Heard through the grapevine that you had an interesting encounter tonight. Brunch tomorrow? I want details. I smiled and typed back. Absolutely. And bring your notebook. I have an idea for our next collection. As I got ready for bed, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. I was wearing silk pajamas that cost more than my old monthly grocery budget, standing in an apartment that overlooked the city where I had once struggled to pay rent. But more than the external changes, I could see something different in my eyes. The uncertainty was gone. The need to prove myself to people who had never mattered was gone. I had become exactly who I was meant to be, not in spite of Madison's cruelty, but because of it. She had given me the gift of clarity, showing me that the only person whose belief in my dreams truly mattered was me. And that gift, unlike the fake bag she had been carrying, was absolutely, authentically real. The next morning, I woke up with 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Word had spread about the previous evening's encounter, and fashion bloggers, industry publications, and social media influencers were all trying to get the story. But I had no interest in turning Madison's humiliation into a publicity opportunity. The moment had been satisfying enough on its own. I did not need to amplify it for the world to see. Instead, I focused on the future, on the new collection that was already taking shape in my mind, on the next chapter of a story that had begun with doubt and was now being written in gold. Because that is what real luxury is, not the ability to destroy someone else's dreams, but the power to build your own so strong that no one can ever tear them down. And as I sat down at my desk to begin sketching the first pieces of The Last Laugh, I realized that the girl Madison had mocked in that cafe was finally, completely, triumphantly gone. In her place sat a woman who had learned the most important lesson of all, that the best revenge is not proving your enemies wrong, but proving to yourself that their opinions never mattered in the first place. The empire I had built was not founded on Madison's doubt, but on my own unshakable belief that dreams, when backed by determination and skill, can become reality. And that reality, unlike the fake bag she had been carrying, would last forever. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of triumph, transformation, and the incredible power of never giving up on your dreams. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, so you never miss a story that could change your life.